I'm Mr. MegaManFan, this is the PC Engine Files, and you are looking at Titan by Naxit Soft, which, as we all know from previous episodes of the PC Engine Files, Naxit is an anagram for Taxon, which is a subsidiary of Kaga Tech Company Limited that still sold games under the Naxit Soft brand well into the late 90s, but they were most famous for making PC Engine games in the late 80s and early 90s, so many of which have been featured on this channel, and so many more probably will be in the future. But what I want to say about Titan to get started, as you notice that it's obviously an Arkanoid clone, is I didn't know it was an Arkanoid clone until I started playing. I went into this without any knowledge, without having read about it in advance. I wanted to discover what Titan was for myself. And let me tell you, based on the title, I had several different thoughts, and one of them was not Arkanoid clone. My first guess was that it was going to be a mech type game or a Gundam type game with gigantic titanic robots, and that obviously isn't the case. The second thought I had was that it might be an anime derived series, like Attack on Titan, even though that obviously came much, much later than this game. Well, I should say the anime came much later than this game. I don't know if the manga it's based on might have been around way back then. I didn't even think to look that up. But neither of these turns out to be the case. It's an Arkanoid clone, but it takes a unique tack on it in that you're controlling a ball that breaks the bricks on both the X and Y axis. You're not just moving your paddle along a horizontal plane, you control the horizontal and the vertical, as they would say in the intro to The Outer Limits. That might be a very dated reference for some of you, but this is also a very dated game, so I think it's actually appropriate to make that joke right now. It's not a bad game because I do like Arkanoid breakout type clone games. I have no problem with them. I enjoy brick ball breaking, even the simplistic games like Alleyway for Game Boy. That one often gets chided for being a very weak game on the Game Boy, but it was one of the first 8 Game Boy games I ever had, and I never saw cause to complain about it because I enjoy breakout type games. So for me, it was always fun to plug in the Game Boy to the wall adapter and play it for half hour, couple hours at a time. Because when you only have a handful of games, you make the most of what you have. Which is also why I never really understood the complaints about Castlevania Adventure that I heard later as an adult. Because to me, having a Castlevania game was better than not having any Castlevania game at all. And the music is so good in that game that it absorbed me into the world, and I did not even notice that it was, quote, clunky and slow. The only complaint I had back then was that some of the jumps were a little hard to make, but it didn't even occur to me to analyze that was because the game was moving at such a slow pace. I was just happy that it looked and felt like a Castlevania game, and it was the only Castlevania game I physically owned at the time. And then it got stolen, so that's a whole nother story that I won't go into here. But back to Titan. You cannot find very much information about this game if you go looking online. Maybe there's a dedicated PC Engine site written entirely in Japanese that I wouldn't be able to read that really goes in depth about it, but the limited English resources that I have access to don't say a whole lot. I do know that it was released March 15th, 1991 in Japan. That's a start. I found that out on the PC Engine Software Bible, and their description takes less than 10 seconds to read. A twist on the breakout theme. Titan has you bounce one of many balls around a maze, nudging them to alter direction to clear the way of blocks. There. That's their entire summary of the game. They have no more or less to say than that. Now, the Wikipedia entry is slightly more in depth, but basically touches on the exact same themes. It says that this was published in France in 1988 and converted to PC Engine by Naxxitsoft in 1991, and again notes that you control the paddle moving on an X and Y axis, and notes that you control many balls, not just one. While I have not progressed far enough into the game that I am controlling many balls, I have to complete the first set of levels before I get to that challenge. And as far as their view of the reception, it lacks a citation, but it still says the following. The game has interesting graphics for its time and an original concept. However, it is criticized by some for bad controls and irritating effects, like the balls sometimes flying off in an unpredictable direction. And even though there's no citation to back that up, I'll back that up. You can plug me into the review right now if you want, because I would say the exact same thing. You can try to angle the ball off this little square that you're moving around these mazes, but because it's not a paddle, and because you're not working with one axis but two, it is very hard to time your hits on the ball to make it bounce the direction you want. And sometimes when you get into the right spot and things careen off of walls, you just stay there and hope that by dumb luck you're breaking the blocks if you just don't move and the ball keeps bouncing off your paddle. That's not really my biggest complaint about Titan. And actually, I don't have that many complaints because I ended up playing this for over 10 minutes. And if it was a really subpar PC Engine game or I absolutely hated the experience, it would be a sub 10 minute video. So you know that I'm not completely opposed to Titan. As I said earlier, I do like Arkanoid games and Breakout games and brick ball paddle games. But my biggest complaint, if I were to issue one, would be the scrolling. It is very jerky when you are moving around the maze to find the ball and hit it with your paddle. It's not as bad as an isometric 3D game like Sonic 3D Blast, but it is very irritating to the eye. The wiki entry used the word irritating, and I'm not irritated by the physics. I'm irritated by the way the screen scrolls when I move the paddle around, and it just feels like everything blurs. Ironically enough, like a Game Boy, like an early Game Boy, if it was a really fast game, the graphics would blur as the screen tried to keep up with the refresh rate and couldn't do it, which is why Castlevania was so slow, because that LCD screen could only refresh at a certain rate, and they didn't really improve upon that technology very much until the Game Boy Color. Not to say that handhelds in general didn't have this problem. You'll find Game Gear games with screen blur. If you use a Turbo Express, you'll find some games with screen blur, but Game Boy games, because of the monochrome or green shades of 4 colors and the low battery output LCD, which made for a long battery life but not very good refresh rates on the screen, yeah, blurring could be a big problem. And you really shouldn't have that happening on a TurboGrafx 16 or a PC Engine game. You shouldn't feel like when you move around the screen, it can't keep up with redrawing the tiles in either the X or the Y direction, but it scrolls smoothly and not smoothly at the same time. And it's just, I don't even know how to explain that. It's almost like you're moving a mouse around a screen, except the mouse stays in the center instead of moving around the screen. Everything moves around the mouse. That's actually a good explanation of what it feels like. I, off the top of my head, just came up with that, and it actually sums it up quite well. It's like your whole screen is moving around the mouse instead of your mouse moving around the whole screen. And it kind of gives you a headache after a while. It takes away from what would otherwise be a much more enjoyable game. And as you can see, I'm now controlling multiple balls, so the action does pick up when you get to the second stage. And I commend Naxxitsoft, Tax, and Kaga, whatever you want to call them, for putting a level select at the beginning of the game, so if you aren't playing this on an emulator and you're playing it on an actual card and you make so much progress and then you're like, I'm done, and turn it off, you can actually start at the level you want to instead of having to play it all the way from the beginning. I also think they've done some interesting things with brick out bonus blocks that you can pick up. The T obviously gives you extra time to complete a level, which is very helpful. I haven't quite figured out what the other ones do yet. I think one enables you to stop the ball on a dime like a magnet, but I can't reliably do that every single time I want it to. I'm not able to just push a button on the controller and always have that work, so I think that's the function, but I can't guarantee it. And there's one that looks like a bomb that I just have not even figured out what you do with that at all. But as this is a breakout clone, I think breaking the bricks is more important than the power-ups you pick up. You just need enough time to break them all, so the extra time is really the one you should focus on when you're playing. And if you want to pick up a copy of this game, it appears to be one of the more affordable PC Engine games that you can get as an import. I've seen listings of loose copies for $12 with free shipping, so it's like probably a $9 plus $3 or $4 shipping game if you think of it that way. Or you can find more complete copies for anywhere from $10 to $20, including factory sealed with free shipping for $20. So yeah, PC Engine games aren't cheap in general, but on the spectrum of just either stupidly common or insanely expensive like Sapphire, this is definitely at the lower end. So if you were looking for something to add to your library, this wouldn't be a bad way to go. I just wish the scrolling didn't bother me as much as it did, because I'm enjoying this game enough, but it's one of those games where it's like, it's actually going to be better for me to play it in short bursts and stage select and start from a stage rather than playing it over the long haul. And I admit here that this may be better if I load it up on the SSD 3, because maybe the blurring is an effect of the emulator and not so much the actual hardware. So I'm going to give it another shot once I load it on my micro SD card and play it there, so I don't hate this game. I don't think it's going to be anybody's top 10 list of all-time must-play TurboGrafx/PC Engine games, but it's okay, especially if you like breakout-type games. I think that's really going to be the key. If you like this genre of games, then Titan is one you should try in emulation and maybe buy a copy. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching.